Well, what's happening, everybody? Welcome to Crazy Happy, the podcast with me,
Hello.
Daniel Fusco. Super excited to have you all joining us today, where we want to explore what does it mean to follow Jesus in this crazy world and uncover who he is and who we are in him and how it's all meant to work together. And so thanks so much for joining us. Also, many of you are just super excited about the book, Crazy Happy, 9 Surprising Ways to Live the Truly Beautiful Life, which is available in all the different formats, whether it's print book or ebook or Audible or all these different things. You can get it wherever books are sold, where we explore what is God's plan for human happiness. Now, guess what? So I love getting right the book, but I really like doing the podcast because I get to talk to people who I think are awesome, people who I just enjoy, people who I look up to, people whose I watch how God uses them. And I think to myself, man, it is so cool that God created this person to do these things. And today I am so blessed to have my friend, Mark Clark, author, theologian, pastor of Village Church, Canadian.
Yeah. I thought you were going to build up to like, I love doing a podcast with people I love and look up to and are interesting. I mean, that's not today because our guest is Mark Clark.
Well, you know what's so funny, Mark? When you've come down and taught at Crossroads, you know, people are all the time like, I can see why you and Mark are friends. You know what I mean? So I don't know if that's bad for you. It's probably definitely good for me, but you know, me and you getting together is madness. How you doing, buddy?
I am doing well. I'm doing COVID well. I mean, I'm looking. You got a background on your book there. I'm a little jealous. Here, put that up
there. You have Jesus over your shoulder. It's
Hello.
So good. That looks nice, doesn't it? Well, so listen, let's talk about this. So Mark has not only is he pastored an amazing church, Village Church up there in it's not even just in Vancouver anymore. He's got campuses all over the nation of Canada. How many campuses do you guys have?
We have I think 9. We have one in Calgary, and then the Winnipeg and Toronto ones are kind of in their core launch phase, and then we have 5 or 6 locally around the greater Vancouver area. So
amazing. So obviously, God's doing a great work in the church, but then you have multiple books that you've released. Your first book was, at least in this season, was The Problem of God. I know you had written a book on Paul before that, which I have a copy of and loved, and but your newest book, The Problem of Jesus, just dropped recently.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the whole problem of series, because I know that this is going to be it's a series of book, and then we want to look specifically at the problem of Jesus together. So talk about that a little bit.
Well, the problem of actually came to me. The first book already had a name, and it's exploring like all the big top apologetic type questions about Christianity, right? Hell and sex and evil and suffering and science and all that. And it had a name. I think it was called like Skeptics Forum or something like that.
Can I just say something real quick? I love the fact that the big problems are hell, suffering, and sex.
So, I mean, I've never actually read an apologetics book that had sex in it, so I thought I'd write one. I think it's the longest chapter in the book because I like writing about it. So it's like, honey, I'm doing research. Anyway, so then the book's almost published. And a guy just was reading something and he sent me a quote, one of our staff one day. His name's Michael. And it was this quote by Tozer, A.W. Tozer. I don't know if you know him. You know, we're so close. I just call him Tozer. All of the problems of heaven and earth, though they were to confront us together and at once, would be nothing compared with the overwhelming problem of God. That he is, what he is like, and what we as moral beings must do about him. I was like, okay, this captures perfectly what I'm writing about. And of course, then there's the play on the word problem. It's an intricate matter to be settled, a question. So more in the math, I got a math problem that needs to be solved. But then, of course, the double entendre of it's also a problem in the sense of Jesus can shake stuff up. There's a scandal there. So that's what the whole problem of series is referring to.
And let's talk specifically about the problem of Jesus then.
Yeah. So, the problem of Jesus is that we have a bunch of people, skeptics and believers alike, who reject Christianity on the wrong stuff. They reject Christianity based on Christians who have fumbled the ball versus Jesus himself. What did he say? What did he do? Who did he claim to be? Did he really die for sin? Did he really rise from the dead? What was his teachings? People aren't rejecting Christianity on that. They're rejecting it on, oh, look, people have fumbled the ball. They burned witches. There's nationalism in the church. There's hypocrisy in the church. It's like, right. Yeah, because the church is filled with sinful people, who are mistake-ridden and all the rest of it. We need to clear all that away and look at Jesus. Who was he? What did he say? What was he talking? What was he on about? What did he do? And then reject or embrace Christianity based on that. So that's where this book is basically everything I've read and preached about Jesus for the last 20 years, put out there to basically say to the skeptic, I want you to believe. And to the Christian, somebody who always follows, I want you to be inspired. I want you to go deeper. I want you to see Jesus maybe like you've never seen him before.
And there's no doubt, Mark, that, I know your story, but I want you to share a little bit about, you speaking to skeptics about Jesus is a very personal thing for you because of your journey. So you want to share a little bit about your journey, as you came to know Jesus and your heart to be able to reach people who are far from God, people who are outside of the faith and some of that.
Yeah. So, I grew up in a pretty antagonistic home toward Christianity. And the story that kind of captures that I tell people is my brother, whose name is Matthew, he's 4 years older than me. When my mom had him, she was like, I want to name this kid Matthew. And my dad said, okay, that's fine, but you have to spell his name with one T because I don't want to spell it the way that's biblical. I don't want anything to do with the Gospels. And then 4 years, so my brother's name is Matthew with one T. And then 4 years later, they had me and called me Mark. So clearly the guy never picked up a Bible before and been like, it's like he's missing the boat here. So no Bible, no church, no prayer, no God, not part of our life. So I've always been like an evidential thinker. I've always been someone who's like, if I'm going to believe something, I want to see the evidence for it scientifically. So I started exploring Christianity later in high school from that philosophical, historical science. I don't want to just believe something because it makes me feel good. I don't want to just believe something because other people believe it. I would actually believe this because it's true. And I found that, Jesus and Christianity was the best idea in the marketplace of ideas. So that's where my background is. And I wanted to go into the film world. Like I wanted to go, similar to you. Like I had different intentions than ministry. And so I had a group of people come around me from all different angles that didn't know each other in this cool little kind of supernatural story and just spoke into my life and said, I think you should go into ministry. And so I started doing, school and then really loved academia and wanted to serve people by being a scholar. And so I started going down that route. That's what moved me to Vancouver. And then when I got here, God was like, I want you to plant a church. I was like, why? There's no Christians in Vancouver. This is Canada, bro. Like, this is like, when I speak in America, I like to say, I come to you from the future. Like, this is where your country is going. There's no Christianity. I don't care about any of that. And so we ended up staying here and planting a church in Vancouver and telling people about Jesus, and people started to show up, get their life changed. But coming at it from that, how do I talk to the skeptic, the unchurched, de-churched person about Jesus every week? That was the heart behind it. It wasn't to, gather a bunch of Christians. And that's what started to happen. And then what happens is, this, new people bring new people. That's why our church grew. The guy who's been sitting in the pew for 20 years in the same pew, he ain't bringing anybody. It doesn't matter what you do. So I started talking to his friend. And then sooner or later, his friend shows up because, you build an environment first where you're talking to the skeptic and then the skeptic shows up. You're answering those questions every week. Don't assume anything. It's like your neighbor doesn't think the Gospels are real. So explain how they are. Your neighbor doesn't believe Jesus even existed. I have a chapter in the book just proving Jesus actually existed because this is like a question now. It's like, what?
So talk a little bit, because obviously people who are listening to this, they're in all different places on their journey of faith, and so there are people who are listeners right now, and they're just like, man, this is a fun podcast, but I'm not sure if I believe all the Jesus stuff. And there's people who've been walking with Jesus, and there's pastors and all these different people. But like very often when it comes to sharing about Jesus with other people, Jesus told us that this is part of who we're supposed to be. We go and make disciples, right? It's like the Great Commission says, it begins like, hey, make disciples. And you do it by going and baptizing and teaching, but most people are like, man, like, well, it comes to make disciples. Like, we'll let the pastor do the sharing about Jesus. And what if they ask me a question I don't understand? How would you speak to them? How would you encourage someone and say, listen, it's okay to be asked questions that you don't understand? How would you speak to that?
Well, first, let's try to get as much understanding as we can, so that we can answer people's questions. And hold
on, and do that by getting The Problem of God and The Problem of Jesus by Mark Clark. So let's put that in there first, because
sure,
I endorse both books. So like I read them, and they're good books. That's why we're talking about this. So okay, keep going. Sorry,
I appreciate that. Yeah, and just really, studying the Bible and thinking through these things and going like, how can I philosophically defend? Because we should want to do that anyway. One of my biggest, like, people ask me what my big stumbling blocks are. One of them is obviously kind of evil and suffering, right? It's like, that's a tough one. And we as pastors, you're not going to pastor very well unless you can have an answer to that in some way that's satisfying. It's not ultimately satisfying, because there's always going to be the why did this happen kind of thing. But, when I think about it from my skeptic atheistic standpoint, I realize that even to have the category called evil and suffering, I actually need some kind of transcendent ethic to put God on trial. Because if I was just an animal with only 1 million years of cognitive wiring in my brain based on my experience in nature, I probably wouldn't deduce half the things I do morally. I need something else to give me those moral categories, because if it's just animals, then a lion eats a zebra. It's not murder. It's just lunch. But if we gotta figure it out, why do I not like it? If it's so it raises these questions for me, and I think they're just better answers when you come up with a theistic worldview than a non-theistic worldview. And so some of it is just really exploring and saying, I got to better understand my faith. I got to better understand God. I got to better understand the Bible. All that. But then there's going to be gaps, and the gaps are beautiful. Who wants, in The Crown? I don't know if you watch The Crown. There's that one line where she's getting all dolled up, and it's like, she's basically becoming the crown. And the guy looks and he says, "Who wants prose when you can have poetry?" Why flatten this thing down when you can, you put a little dust on this girl and it's magic. It's a fairy tale. That's what you want, and it's like, there's a piece of it. Bonhoeffer said, one of the jobs of a theologian is to retain the mystery, because there's awe in the gaps. And so let's explore, let's get the right answers for the doctrines and get it all. Yeah. Let's research. Let's leave in. My daughter the other day, she's 10 years old. She's like, "Dad, can people right now in heaven see us and what we're doing?" I don't know. It's like, maybe there's that passage in Hebrews, but I don't really think that's probably what it's about. Hey, and when we get to heaven, Dad, am I going to be able to talk to, so-and-so and some author or something? Like, like, Daniel, you and I going to be sitting around with Lewis and Tolkien going, yeah, you smoking a pipe and going, hey, what about, I don't know. Because there's so many things the Bible doesn't tell. There's a gap, man. And so that's okay. There's always going to be that. That's where faith comes in. But as I like to say, you run the ramp of reason and then take the leap of faith. If you don't do that, then you're going to have a faith that's filled with whatever you think in the moment. And that's dangerous, because depending on the culture and the specific time you live in, you're just going to build a worldview or a faith that's just what you think up, which is extremely dangerous.
You're listening to the Edify Podcast Network. We'll be right back. This podcast is part of the Edify Podcast Network. Edify is a faith-inspiring app that brings together thousands of the best Christian podcasts in one place for your listening enjoyment. Cut through the noise and grow your faith by diving into the world's top Christian podcasts today. Download the Edify app for free from the App Store or Google Play, or by going to edify.app. That's EDIFI.app. This is the Edify Podcast Network. Welcome back.
It's so good what you're sharing. And I think for all of you who are listening, I always encourage people that when you share your faith with people, you will always be asked questions that you don't understand. And my favorite answer for that is, hey, that's a great question. And I want to honor your question.
Yeah.
So let me think about it and do a little research.
Mm-hmm.
And then let me get back to you. And what you've done is, first, you haven't given someone bad information, which a lot of people don't embrace Jesus because along the way, someone didn't really honor the question or gave them like a little plaque or didn't know how to answer and said something crazy. But not only have you honored their question, you've also given yourself an opportunity to have a second conversation about it. And then you get to grow. And in a lot of ways, for me as a pastor, so many things that I've learned is along the way you get asked the question and you don't really know you're like, I know what the Bible says, but like, that's a very profound question. And I don't know if I have the answer. And because I don't want to get stuck not having good answers, I'm like, well, I better go find that thing out. And then you go and you research it down, you grab Mark's book, you open it up, like, what do I say in this situation? And then you come like, oh, hey, I thought about what you were talking about. And hey, here's the answer. And they're like, wow, yeah, that's real. No one ever talks about it to me that way. And you're like, yeah. And so it is always that great opportunity, when we do share our faith and when we do get asked, questions that are challenging, it gives us an opportunity to learn and grow.
Yeah. And I think even pointing out to people, maybe the flaws in their own worldviews at times and letting people process, oh yeah, I'm actually asking this question to be critical, but I don't even have a worldview that's logical myself. And so having people challenge, like one example would be my family not being Christian, they love to say, when my grandma passed away, they would say, at least she's not suffering anymore. I mean, that's generally what people say, right? Like you have someone in the hospital, they're dying, so they look at me as someone with like, you have faith, you believe in all these things that can't be proven, Mark, and it's silly. Then my grandma dies and she's not suffering anymore. And the question to me is, how do you know that? Like you have a faith position that tells you that Nanny's not suffering anymore. In fact, she could be suffering more. There's nothing, you can't prove. You have a metaphysical belief system about what happens to people in the afterlife, which is nothing. But how do you know it's true? And getting people to question their own worldview out of which they're trying to deconstruct or criticize yours is also a helpful thing. And like you said, invites the follow-up conversation.
Now, okay, let's talk about this because, you're getting into something that I think a lot of people who follow Jesus, and I know that not everyone who listens or watches this does, but like the idea of apologetics and different kind of approaches to apologetics. So that, that word apologetics, it doesn't mean that we're giving an apology, like we're sorry for it. It's the way we explain it. And there's that idea that, and it's one of the things that you do masterfully, both in your books and also in your preaching ministry, is that you link up both what we can call classical apologetics, which is more of the idea of this is how we know the Bible is true. This is how we know that Jesus is a real person, right? So that's the idea of like, these are the things that we believe and these are the truths that we hold because of it. Yeah. But then you also link up what scholars call presuppositional apologetics, where you're not beginning with, this is what the Bible says and this is how I know it's true. That's classical apologetics. Yeah. But this is what you believe and like the hearer's presupposition. And now let me speak to you from where you are and let me show you both where there might be an error in your worldview or your faith or your faith assumptions, like you were just talking about. And also here's how Jesus also brings now clarity and structure to your now destabilized worldview. And so it's this idea that not only are we here to tell you this is what the Bible teaches and why we believe it to be true and how it's plausible and rational and all these things, but this idea of precept, like where we start with what someone else believes. And I think one of the things that Christians don't do well is we're so used to people attacking our faith, and questioning it, that we never think, well, everyone's, if that's the way we're going to explore people's worldviews, then the playing field can be level. And as believers, we don't do it in an attacking way, but we do it in a way that is actually saying, listen, okay, so we're going to put like Jesus said, the measure you use will be measured back to you. So let's put your worldview on the same grid of, is it really plausible and how do you know, as you're doing to my worldview? And I think it's something that you do massively, both in the books and in your preaching ministry. So talk about that.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think that it's important because I don't want, the motive behind it isn't to be like, hey, look at me, I didn't get stuck in your little trap. Like, that's not the motive. The motive is ultimately, do you really want to live your life in a worldview that's contradictory at its core? Then don't believe what you're saying anymore. Like, if you're going to put God on trial for evil, but according to your own worldview, you shouldn't even have a category called evil because your worldview doesn't allow it, then abandon it. Like, I'm not telling you have to, that instant you become a Christian. I'm just telling you, let the instability of your own logic at least rock you a bit. I use the word scandal in the subtitle of the book. It's like, there's a scandal to Christianity, and the scandal is that we all get told we're kind of wrong, about God. All of us, we're wrong about salvation. We're wrong in trusting in beauty and success and money and fame and sex and to save us and give us meaning and purpose in life. That's wrong. We're lost. We're the younger brother and the prodigal son. We're lost in all these different ways, whether religiously we're lost or from the classic kind of secular ways, we're lost. And that's offensive. There's a scandal to that. And then it's like, can I trust Jesus to make me found? And am I willing to be kind of discombobulated by him? So I think that's important. The other thing that's important in the world that we live in, Daniel, is I think it was Charles Taylor years ago pointed out, building off something Leslie Newbegin said. He said, when we're doing preaching or living missionally in the world, evangelism, whatever, one of the things that we have to understand is we don't so much live in a secular society as much as we live in a pagan society, meaning we're not just coming in going, hey guys, none of you have gods, and now we're going to present Christianity to you. It's that we live in a society that actually does worship gods. Power, money, beauty, fame, other religions. And our job in the missional task is not just to come in and go, I'm going to start from zero. And it's like, oh, there's a bit of deconstructing what you worship to then replace it with the true worship of the one true God who's found in Jesus. That's part of the task. And that, adding that into the conversation would be important rather than just leaving people where they are.
Yeah, it's really powerful because I think we have a tendency to think that, oh, no, they don't believe in God, so they don't believe in anything. And really what you're saying is that every worldview, because, we're wired to find ultimate meaning and worship in things in God, but we're wired, but when we don't do it, we end up finding ultimate meaning in influence on TikTok or, like, can I, get this thing done or whatever.
Yeah.
Now, talk a little bit about this. As somebody, obviously, like, I've gotten a chance to preach at Village and met lots of people there. Talk a little bit about the journey that you see for people who have never really followed Jesus, the journey that happens when you're calling into question the worldview, and then that journey that people go on from, I walk in and I'm a skeptic, but I'm going to this church because there's a cute girl who I met and she goes to this church and I want to hang out with her, and there's a great way to hang out with her or whatever, and the journey that is for people.
Yeah, it's a good question. So 2 weeks ago, we baptized 42 people, and I got in touch with one of our stats people and just said, how many people have we baptized in the last 11 years? And they said 2,000. Now, that to me is crazy because, to come back to your question, what makes a person? So it's not just a bunch of Christians coming from other churches going, oh, look, Mark's hairstyle or something. Definitely not that.
You do have a great hairstyle, by the way.
Oh, yeah. It's going back more and more.
Our foreheads are getting bigger because we're getting smarter.
Yes. That's a good way of putting it. I don't know whether you're ever going to lose your hair, but 2,000 people. What causes 2,000 people, adults, like 40-year-old men, 80-year-old people, 14-year-olds, to come to know Jesus and go into the waters of baptism? Like something special is going on there. And it usually starts with a kind of questioning of exactly what we just said, questioning of their gods. Maybe they've walked away from the church. Maybe they grew up in the church and they walked away from it, or maybe they've never gone. There's a guy, we baptized someone, they've never been to a physical location. They came to Christ in an online service, and then we're getting baptized because we haven't gathered again since COVID started. There's another guy sent me an email. He said his father was a psychic, and he was a psychic, and he's come to know Jesus, kind of coming out of that life and giving his life to, so it looks different for everybody. Sometimes it's, it's funny the way people come to Jesus, because people constantly, in the missional church movement discussion, for instance, the constant discussion is, you need small, intimate. That's where people come to Jesus. Like, I never would have come to Jesus in that. I need an arena where I can sit and think. I'm not, if I'm coming into your house, sitting in your living room, bro, I'm probably freaking out. If I'm not a Christian and there's like 7 people looking at me like, let's do this together, I'd be like, yeah. So I think there's both, and there's different personalities that come to know Jesus in different ways. And I think some people get their faith deconstructed at Village a bit. It's funny. Everyone's like jokes that a few things. They know that their faith got rocked and they know we were in the Bible. But if someone walked up to them at lunch and said, what was that sermon about? They wouldn't even know where to start. Right? They're like, I basically would fail every preaching class in Bible college today, right? Because I don't have one big idea. I'm all over the map. And so people know they were challenged and changed or whatever, but they're not sure what the one big idea was. And so you hear people, they get their faith deconstructed, but then they're also looking for, Mark, tell us what to do. Like, give us that thing we can put on our fridge. And I'm not really good at that either. Because they're like, I just want, but what they do know is their faith got deconstructed and they gave their life to Jesus. Something profound happened. And then a transformation starts to happen in their life where their marriage starts to get healed, or their, whatever the practical transformation implication is. And it just looks different for everybody. So the journey is fun to watch though.
So good. Now, to change gears just a little bit.
Yeah.
I know that you are a husband and you're a girl dad. You have girls around. How has that, because like you have an older brother. Do you have any other siblings?
Nope, just an older brother.
Okay, so you're bold and brash, and I always love it when you've been preaching a lot. It sounds like you've been gargling with nails a little bit.
Well, I only quit smoking a few years ago.
But talk about how Jesus is using. You're in a family full of ladies. And I know, I think it might be your oldest daughter is the same age as my middle daughter, and when they hung out, they were like fast friends, and so you're raising young ladies. How is that impacting your life, the way that you see Jesus? Like, how is God using this stage of marriage and parenting to transform your life?
Oh man, that's a whole other world, man. It is. I realize. I'm like an 80s dad, and it doesn't work. That's it. No, I'm like, you know what I mean? Like, if I'm going to, I got to teach these girls how to survive in the world. So I'm constantly like, come pick up your stuff. Hey, do that. Yeah. And my wife's like, just just chill. Like, this is the freaking military. Just like, I'm like, yeah, but I got to teach them if they're going to have a job and they got to make sure. And that's what's going through my head. It dawned on me recently, like, I don't think that's how I'm going to get results out of girls. Like, I think I could get results like that if I was raising boys. Like, come get the garbage. It's your job to do that's your job, you know. Because I'm like, you know, I constantly say to my girls when my wife's not around, you know, the world is not going to be nice to you. You know, you cannot. So I'm trying to toughen you up. And then she's like, yeah, no, that's not really the thing. Like, so I remember, I'll give a good example of this. My wife was away for 2 days, and we were doing something. We were supposed to go out to friends, and they were all excited. And there was this one task they were supposed to do, and they didn't do it. So I said, okay, they're all at the door, changed, coats ready to go. I said, we're not going anywhere. What do you mean? Till this task is done. It was going to take a long time to do it. Daddy, crying. I said, guys, your tears aren't working on me. Like, you're wasting time. We'll go, but it's only when you're done this task. Cry. And I remember, I guess one of them texted my wife, you know, Daddy's basically a gong show. Come save us. And she texted me back. She said this one line. She said something like, remember, relationship over rule. And I was like, crap. Like, I preach that every day. I preach it every Sunday. You know, spirit of the law, letter of the law. But that was really profound. Like, when you're talking about raising girls, a relationship with those girls is going to be more important than any dogma you can hand down from the mountain to try to make them obedient by habits all the time. So I'm learning, man. I'm learning, but they're fun. They teach me a lot. It's all sanctification, and we have a lot of fun. I'm more of a artsy. I'm like you, right? So I do a lot of movies. As the kids grow up, they're starting to become daddies girls a bit. Because my wife watches stuff like, I don't know, When Calls the Heart or whatever this nonsense, you know, whatever. And I got the girls right,
like the love stories on the plains where the woman lost her husband, and then there's like the strong godly man who falls in those movies. I know these. These. I have girls. I know these.
Yeah, and I got my oldest two are now, like, we're watching Dark Knight together downstairs. So now they're turning into them and kind of turning on mom a bit, and, like, you know, they're doing Joker lines to my wife, who's horrified and thinks that's, like, you know, terrible. And so my kids are loving it. So they're slowly coming around.
So good. Well, you know, I asked the question because, like, I realize, like, I'm always trying to remind people that the context of our lives is the curriculum for what God wants to do in our lives. Yeah. You know, and knowing you as I do, you know, and I'm always like, man, like, for all of my friends who are dads of just girls, it's like there's always these great stories of, like, man, like, if I had boys, I'm trying to do like how I'd raise a boy with raising my girls. And it might not be the smartest thing, you know? And so I wanted to give you the opportunity just to share about that a little bit.
I got lots of that.
Now tell me this, Mark. So as you look around, you know, and we just have a few more minutes, you know, for the podcast here, as you look around what God is doing, you know, in this cultural moment, you know, obviously, you know, we're recording this now in, you know, the first half of 2021. It's 2020, but it's still just 2021. You know, it's like, it's just the calendar changed, and a lot of things haven't changed. And for certain people and certain where they live, maybe things have changed a lot. But we're in the Northwest, and so it's like everything's always a little bit. We're future past always. Yep. You know, and you see what's going on in the world. What is maybe a thing or two that you're like, man, I just wish that the people of God would really embrace this in the midst of all of this, other than just Jesus. Obviously, we want people to embrace Jesus. That fixes everything. But
yeah, I posted a little meme that I found and saved the other day, and it was like 15 straight times of the New Testament says love one another, and it was all the citations of those passages. That'd be kind of cool, you know, if we loved one another versus, you know, I think I said, like, it doesn't say be cool to one another. It doesn't say deconstruct one another. It doesn't say complain and, you know, whatever. It's like love. Like, you know, what would it look like for us to love well one another, though? Like, we talk a lot about loving the world, and obviously we're supposed to, but there's a piece of it that's like, do we love the church well? Like, or do we beat each other up a little bit? And, so that'd be kind of cool to see happen. And for, the church to be about the right things versus some of the things that we've gotten wrong, like the modern kind of American Canadian version of Christianity that probably needs to die, whether that's, materialism, the comfort, the idols of the Christian life, right? The family, the comfort, the money. What would it look like to have those pried out of our hands so that we can like really hold on to God and treasure him above everything? When we baptize someone, I say to them in the water, do you take Jesus as your Lord and your Savior and your treasure? Because there's lots of people who will take Jesus as Lord, like, teach me stuff, or Savior, like save me from hell and sin. But to treasure him above everything else in the universe is like the main thing. And so how we could do that well would be good. Yeah. So there's a couple ideas.
So good. So if people want to find you online, where do they find you? And if people want to get a copy of The Problem of Jesus, your newest book, or The Problem of God, which is your previous book, which is part of that Problem of series, where can people find Mark Clark and all the problems that he is addressing?
I would go, the book, the easiest thing is just a little website called Amazon.com.
What's that? I've never heard of this before.
It's an up and coming, just little mom and pop right now, but they're fighting it out. So let's help them out a bit. And jump over. Yeah, Amazon's probably the easiest. You get it in a couple of days for The Problem of Jesus and The Problem of God. And then Instagram, I'm pretty active on that. So Mark_Clark. People can usually find me there messing around. And those are probably the two big ones. I'm on Facebook too. So
cool. And you have your own podcast as well. Where can people find that?
Yeah. Well, probably the better one to follow would be the Village Church sermon one. So it's called Village Church and Sermons in My Name. But then I also have a podcast. So if you just type in my name, the Mark Clark podcast should come up. And I post on there, probably not enough. I'm not as consistent as you, as organized as you, but I do put stuff on there. So
good. Well, Mark, thanks so much for being with me.
All the best to you and your family, man. You're doing awesome.
Dude, you too. And so all of you out there, thanks for joining me, Daniel Fusco, on the Crazy Happy Podcast. We want to encourage you. Listen, share your faith. Sprinkle some happiness around. Gosh, the world needs it, and so do we. God bless you all. We'll talk to you soon.